Hey, what's poppin', guys? I'm back with another tutorial that is going to show you the step-by-step process of creating this 4PFI style pendant. But before we get started, I want to let you know that the final project file of this video is definitely available and you can find its link in the description. Let's get to it. Okay guys, the first step of this project is making two types of diamond and create a material, then we are good to go. So let's just start by adding a circle to our scenes by pressing Shift A and go for mesh circle. By the way, you can see what I'm doing here if you missed anything or if you get confused. And let's go by just deleting it and adding it again. I just open this menu and I enter 8 for the vertices, and I press tab to go to the edit mode, press F to fill this up, and I press E to extrude it. Now somewhere like here is good. I press Ctrl R to add a loop cut. I go up, somewhere like here is good as well, and I press 3 on my keyboard to go to the face mode, and you can switch between vertex mode and edge mode and face mode by just pressing 1 2 3 on your keyboard, or just pressing here, clicking on these icons. So I press 3 to go to face mode. I select that, I hold shift, select this as well. I press S, Shift Z to scale these faces in every axis except the Z one, and I think that's fine, maybe a little bigger. And I select the bottom face, I scale it more to something like this. I think this is a good diamond, maybe you can scale it up a little bit, and press G and Z to just move it down. Something like this is fine. And now I hide this. I go ahead, add a plane. I go to the edit mode by pressing tab. I press S, X, and I press 0.5, maybe something like this. I just press E to extrude this up. I go for somewhere like here, maybe 0.8 is a fine number. You can also press E and you can enter 0.8 on your numpad. And I just select this face. It's selected already. I hold shift and I select this face as well. Then I just press Ctrl B to bevel them, something like this. Don't scroll your mouse to get more edge loops, and yeah, this is fine. I press 2 to go to the edge mode, and I hold Ctrl Alt. I just select this one, and you can see when I hold Ctrl R and select an edge, it will select it in every side. So I hold Ctrl Alt again plus Shift this time to select this one as well, and also this. Then I press Ctrl B to bevel these edges too, and something like this is fine. I'm not sure this is a diamond or not, but I'm just cool with it. You can scale it or maybe whatever you want, but I'm okay with it, and we'll be playing with it a lot in the future, especially in the geometry nodes, so just be chill. I press Ctrl S to save my project. Now while we have these, you can name them whatever you want. I name this one diamond.rec, maybe that's nothing, diamond.rec, and I name this diamond. So here we go. I just select both of them, I scale them down a bit, something like this. I press Ctrl A, I apply their scale. Now we are good with diamonds. Let's create their materials. I just click here to go to the shading viewport. I go to the material properties, I add a new material, and yes, I change this principal BSDF to something called glass BSDF. I just decrease the roughness all the way to 0, and I increase the IOR to 2.8. yeah, this is fine. It will be way better when we go to cycles and when we render these. And I also select the material for the second diamond as well, and I just name this diamond. And here we go. So the next material I want to create is glitter, and I just add a plane to create that material. I just hit on this new button, I name this glitter, and this time Maybe we are going to shading workspace, and here we go. I just customized my workspace. Probably for you it's horizontal, and you can just press here, right click on these borders and just press join areas maybe, or just click on these orders area and choose like vertical splits. You can split your workspace, you can join it, and you can customize it on your own. I just go for a shader editor. And before we get to work with nodes, you need to go here in the edit menu and preferences, and just go to the add-on section, and here you can search for a node wrangler add-on. It's installed by default on Blender, so you can just check it out to enable it, and it will help you a lot to work faster in the node editor. Like here I can press Ctrl T while selecting the BSDF, and it will add something like this for me, which is really cool and really handy. From this image texture, I just hit on the open option and I go look for my texture, which I definitely leave the download link of this in the description, so you can download it from there. And I just go ahead, I just drag it, and when I leave it here, I can add a new texture that is called normal map. And to the color, yes sir, I just connect it to the normal of my principal BSDF, and we can see nothing yet. I just need to bring down the roughness maybe to some number like 0.2, and I also bring up the metallic up to 1, something like this sounds good. Maybe I can decrease it a bit like 0.8 or 0.9. It's on you, and it's your call. You can even make the roughness 0 or more. You can play with it and you'll see what it looks in the future. That's it. I just delete this plane because I don't need it anymore. I just wanted to create the material. So let's move forward. I just named this collection to diamonds basically, and I go for a new collection, not inside of this one. I rename this one references, and I go hit Ctrl A, I go for image and reference, and I go and grab my reference image. I also leave the download link of this reference image in the description of this video. You can go get it there. So just scale it down. And by the way, if you want to reset the rotation of this like I did, you just need to press Alt R. And if you want to reset the location at any point, like you can make it to the default location, you can press Alt G, and default scale Alt S. That's it. I just scale it down, hold Control while I'm scaling down to have more control on it. Maybe scale it up a little bit. We can scale down our chain later. So I just disable the diamonds collection. I don't need it right now. I press 7 on my numpad to go to the top view, and maybe just move it a little bit down. Yes, I go to top view, and the first step of creating this pendant is creating the holder. Basically, I don't know what is this called, but I just call it holder, and the base part, I don't know. I just press Shift A, and I go for a mesh, a plane, and then I go to the edit mode by pressing tab, and now I can press Alt Z to just make this X-ray and go to the X-ray mode. I can also hit on this option to just switch between the normal mode and X-ray mode, and I just go ahead, scale this down a bit. In the x-axis, I press SX to do this. I think you learned these shortcuts, and I maybe leave it somewhere like here. I move these vertices up by pressing G and Y. You can press G to move your selected object, press R to rotate it, and press S to scale it. And also after pressing R, S, or G, you can press X, Y, or Z to just rotate or move or scale your object in those axes. So I just select these vertices, move them down, G, Y, and now I want to add loop cuts. I go press Ctrl R and I just left click here, I move it down before left clicking again, then I left click again to release it, then I do the same, and then I do the same, and I do the same again. Now I just add a loop cut here, I add a loop cut here, basically in the every edges of this pendant I add a loop cut. It's here basically, and that is it. So now the only thing I want to do is selecting all of these vertices and press X to extrude them, and press X to extrude them in the x-axis. I go ahead, release it somewhere like here, maybe move it a little backwards. I press GX, go for here to just align it with this edge, and I go to edge mode by pressing 2 on my keyboard or just hitting here, and I hold shift to deselect this edge and also this edge. So I press extrude again, I go for somewhere like here, I deselect this edge, I extrude again, then I deselect this edge and I press E and X again, something like this. Now it's fine, let me see. Yeah, it's good, but I just select this edge, press X, and I delete the vertices. Maybe I select this edge as well and press Ctrl X to just dissolve it, because we don't need those edges. For the rest, I select this edge, I press EX to extrude it, just like that. I add a loop cut right here, maybe somewhere like here, and I also add a loop cut right here. Then I just select this edge and hold shift to select this one as well. Then I press F to fill this gap, and I go back to the vertex mode, just selecting this one, press GX to extrude it back, just like that. Maybe move these vertices back as well by pressing G and X. I can also move this edge back a bit by pressing double G. You can slide between loops, so I'm doing the same thing, and I just move this back by pressing double G, somewhere like here is fine. Now it looks pretty good, but we need to do this round part of the P, which is quite challenging, but no problem. Just select all of these vertices, press X and delete. Add a loop cut here by pressing Ctrl R and just move up somewhere like here maybe, and just move them up a little bit somewhere like here. That's fine. Then select this edge, press Shift S and choose cursor to select it. Then just go screw on the toolbar and go for the spin tool. Choose it, then select one of these edges, click here and hold and drag, and that's it. But before we do anything else, just open this menu and maybe decrease this number a bit to something like 8. Yeah, I think 8 is fine. And then just go back to the vertex mode, go back to your main tool. Now the only thing we need to do is merging these vertices, and after that just edit this circle a little. So I select this vertex, then I select this, I press M on my keyboard, I go for merge at last, and it's merged. Then select this one, pull it out a bit, then I select this, I press M and I choose at last, then it's merged too, and we have a great loop. So the next thing I'm going to do is just turning on the proportional editing. You can do that by the shortcut O on your keyboard as well. And I just open this menu, I choose connected only, and that's it. I select this vertex, I press G, and you can see we can move a larger area than we used to, and it's because of the proportional editing. So you can scale this circle up and down by pressing page down or page up on your keyboard, or just scrolling your mouse, but I prefer the manual key, which are the keyboard. So I just press G to move them and place them in the right place according to my reference image. So that is it, guys. I'm fine with this part. Now we just need to fill this part of the circle, and that can be done by adding a loop cut here. Press Ctrl R and hit 3 on my numpad and just add these edge loops. Then select all of them, press Ctrl F and grid fill, and it's working pretty good. Okay guys, now we are almost done with the base part of our pendant, and I just go ahead, I hide my reference image, which I name it reference here in the outliner, and I make this plane out of the reference collection. I just add it to another collection that is called, I don't know, pendant, 4pf pendant maybe, or main object. I just add it here. I name this one holder or base, and here we go. I just disable my reference for a second to add some modifiers to this object. I go to modifiers properties and I go to add a solidify modifier in the first step, and I enter 0 for the offset. I go for some more thickness, something like this. Maybe it's too high. I go for a number like 0.12 maybe. Yeah, I like this. 0.12 sounds good to me. So the next modifier is bevel, and I go for more, like 2 or 3 segments and less of the amount, like 0.15 sounds good to me. Then I also right click and choose shade auto smooth, and now I like it. I just go to edit mode, I select this edge maybe, yes, I go ahead, press GX and just move it a little bit back to make this more flat and straight. This is good, we can edit it later too. So the next step is adding a geometry node modifier basically, and go to the geometry nodes workspace. So this is the geometry node workspace. I just hit on this new button and I go ahead, I add a node that is called instance on points, and by holding shift and pressing A you can add something, you can search for something, and it's just like the object mode, and just like that. Then I move this down, and to the favor of the node wrangler add-on, we can now hold Ctrl Shift and right click and drag between these nodes to join them. And by doing that, I just brought back my main object. So that is it. I just enable the diamonds collection and I select the first diamond. I press Shift D to take a duplicate of this, and I immediately after I press Shift D, I don't do anything, I just right click to put it back at the default location. Then I just hide these other 2 diamonds and I rename these to diamond point obj. I'm gonna use this one as the instances of points of this object. So I just click and drag on this diamond and move it directly to my node editor. I connect geometry to the instance. Then I just scale it down by clicking and drag on all of these values, something like this. I like it. And now to make this more interesting, we are going to add another modifier that is called remesh, and just make it to the top of the geometry nodes, and that's it. It's way more interesting now. I can enter a number like 0.08 for the voxel size to increase the amount of these diamonds, and I just click on my geometry node material to bring back my workspace. I scale them down a lot, like to a number like 0.05, maybe even smaller, 0.03. yeah, this is it. And I also decrease this number as well to a number like 0.02, and here we go. It's way better than it was. I can make this 0.035 or 0.04. yeah, just like that. This is dope. But now we need to rotate all of these diamonds. So to do that, we need 2 nodes that is called sample nearest. One of them is called sample nearest and the other is called sample index. And after adding these, I switch this type to vector and this one to face. And I also change this to face, and I go ahead, I just duplicate this group input, I connect the geometry to this and this output of these nodes. I also need another node that is a field that is called normal, and I connect this normal to this value. Then all we need to do is another node that is called align Euler to vector. If I pronounce it in the right way, I choose the z-axis, I connect the value to vector and rotation to rotation. Now here we go, it's not working, and that's because we didn't connect this index to this one. And here we go, it's working now and it's pretty good. And the reason why I duplicated this diamond and didn't use this one directly is because now I want to go to the edit mode, select this diamond, select all of the vertices by pressing A, all of the object basically, and pressing G and Z and move it down. And just zoom in to see what is good. And somewhere like here. Yes sir. Maybe a little more. Yeah, somewhere like here is fine. We just needed to just change the position of the origin point basically, and that is it guys. I like it. And also when I go to the material preview, I can see that the material of the diamond is applied on all of these instances. You can also play with these numbers a lot if you want, like I can make this 0.02 and I can decrease this number as well to 0.1, and I will get smaller diamonds, which is more beautiful, maybe in your opinion. And it's completely on you. You can do whatever you want as your computer lets you do. And yeah, I just went with similar number to the previous numbers I used. I went for 0.03 for the scale and 0.015 for the voxel size of my remesh modifier. And now to get rid of this diamond object right here, I select it, I press M, I create a new collection that is called disabled. And it's the place for disabled objects, which we don't need to see them anymore and which we don't need to see them in our renders as well. Next thing I want to do is applying that glitter material on the base object, but before that I need to apply these three modifiers to just UV unwrap this and apply the material. For that I can directly do this, but if you want you can press Shift D to duplicate this object and right click to just leave it in the default location, and then add it to a new collection that is called saved. And you can use this collection to save objects in order you want to change them in the future and when you don't have access to the original version, you know. I just disable it. And then I select my main object, I go ahead, select this modifier, press Ctrl A to apply it, like just like that. I press Ctrl A again, and also you can go to this menu and apply it from here. Then I just deselect it and I just disable this geometry node modifier for a second. Now when I go to the shading viewport and I apply the material, you can see it's working, but it's not working properly. But it will get fixed as soon as I go to the edit mode, press A and I press U to UV map this object, and I choose Smart UV project. Okay, and that is it. You can see it's working very good. And I can also go to the shading workspace, go ahead, and from this mapping node I can click and drag on these scale options and I just scale it up to a number like 3. This looks good, but you can also play with these values and these numbers and just make this number 0.5 and decrease it, and you can experiment different looks to see what you like, you know what I'm saying. Then after all, go to the modifier properties and enable the geometry node modifier in the viewport. That is it guys. It was pretty much the whole thing of creating this holder for our letters, and I suggest to keep this geometry node disabled while you are working on your project, and when you want to when you wanted to render it, you can just enable this back. But although it's already enabled in your renders, but I just suggest to keep it disabled while you're working, so it will help you to work faster, especially if you have a slow laptop or PC or something. And that's it. Let's move to the next part, which is creating the letters. Okay, to create the letters, I'm going to start with a plane. I just press Shift A, I go and add a plane here, and I go to the edit mode by pressing Tab, and I go to the top view by pressing 7 on my numpad. I just zoom in, and I go to the X-ray mode by pressing Alt and Z, or you can just tap here to change between the normal and X-ray mode. And I press S and X to scale this plane down in the X-axis. Then I just press G and X to move it in the X-axis, and I then select these two vertices. I press G and Y and I move them down like this. I move these two vertices up a little, and I press A after that. Then I press Shift D to duplicate all of this, and I then right click to just leave it at where it was at the default position. And then I press R and probably Z, or I don't need to press Z, but that's fine. Then I enter 90 on my numpad. So yeah, now I'm just trying to create this 4 letter, and I'm just selecting these vertices. I press G to move them. After that, I add a loop cut right here. I press Ctrl R and I just click here. I go up, I leave it here. I add another loop cut here by pressing Ctrl R and just left clicking. Then I just add 2 other loop cuts in the horizontal rectangle. Now I just want to align all of these vertices and merge them together to keep my object a single object. It's very easy though. I just go ahead to this menu, I select active element, and now while I have selected these 2 vertices, when I just hold Shift and select this vertex, this is the active element. So if I press S and X and then enter 0 on my numpad, you can see that these 2 are aligned with this active element. So I do the same for these vertices. I press SX and then I enter 0 on my numpad, and I also do the same for these 2 vertices. I select these 2 first, and at last I select this to just make this active. You know, the color is different, it's white here. And I press S, and this time I press Y, and then I enter 0 on my numpad. They are all aligned and we are good. So that is it. And now while they are all aligned, I just go ahead and enable this tool that is called Auto Merge Vertices. So now if I go ahead and select one of these vertices and press G and then just left click right there, you can see it will merge with the overlaid vertex. And that's easy, just select each of them, press G, left click, and they will be merged. So that's it. Now it's all one object and we can move on. I press Ctrl R to add a loop cut and I go somewhere like here, or maybe a little more. You can press double G to slide edges or vertices like I did, and I add another loop cut here by pressing Ctrl R. And now what I do is just selecting this edge, and I hold Shift, I select this edge, I press F to fill the gap in between. And now I can play with the location of these vertices to like determine a sensible width for this part of the letter. And yeah, that is quite fine. You can preview it better by just turning off the X-ray mode and press Shift Alt Z to just turn off or turn on this show overlays option, and that is quite fine. But I'm just going to play a little more with it to find the best result. Now I'm happy with it. I just move on and create the other letters. So I just go to the face mode by pressing 3 on my keyboard and I select this face. Then I press Shift D to duplicate it, and immediately after that I press Y to move it in the Y axis, and something like this is fine. Then I just go back to vertex mode and I select these 2 vertices, and I press G and X to move them. Somewhere like here is fine. Then I just duplicate this one again. I move it down by pressing Y, and I just duplicate it one more time like this, and I just rotate this face by pressing R and Z, and I enter 90 on my numpad to rotate it 90 degrees. And I do this because I don't want to lose the depth, and approximately we can do that, but I just prefer to do the hard way and more time consuming way, you know. I just merged them very soon, and it's already merged, I think, yes, because I got this auto merge vertices enabled. And I just add a loop cut here. I think you got the point, and you just learned everything you need to know to just merge these vertices. But if it's too confusing, I'm really sorry. You just comment your problems and I will answer to them. But this is just easy. Just add loop cuts by pressing Ctrl R and move them to just catch up every two vertices, you know what I'm saying? That's it. Now we have one single object, I think. Just press L to select everything, and yes sir, it's one single object. And now what I need to do is just moving these vertices down by selecting them and pressing G and Y. Now I just select these two vertices, move this back a little, select these two as well, moving them somewhere like here. And again, to keep the width the same number, I just select all of these faces, or you can just select one of these and hold Ctrl, then select the last one. It will select all of them together, and then I just press Shift E and I press Y to go up. Somewhere like here is good for the next letter, which is P, and yeah, somewhere like here is good. I just go back to the vertex mode by pressing 1 on my keyboard, and I just select these, move them up a little bit, somewhere like here, and move these vertices down. Yeah, this is fine. And now to make this round part, I'm going to do the same that I did for the base of this pendant. I just select this edge, and by the way, I switch to edge mode by clicking here, or you can press 2 on your keyboard, it's a shortcut. Then I hold Shift and I press S, and I just move the cursor to selected, and now I select one of these edges, this one or this one, that doesn't matter, and I go for the spin tool, which is here. After that, I just click and drag. That is it. This is pretty fine, but if you just don't want to do all the editing here, we can just move the cursor a little like to the right by pressing N to like this menu to show up, and go to the, I think, the view section. Yes, you can change the location of your 3D cursor right here. I just move it in the x-axis, I hold Shift and I drag this a little bit. You can see it's moving, and now I'm going to do the same, and yes, it is way better. Somewhere like here is fine. Just hold Ctrl and move this to have more control on it. Then I press N to hide this menu, and I go ahead to the vertex mode. I just try to connect these two by just selecting this, then selecting this, press M and choose merge at last, and do the same for this one. And now we just need to do a little editing. I just select these two vertices, press double G to slide them, and these should be done if you want to have a quite perfect object. And you can also turn on the proportional editing from here, or you can just hit O on your keyboard, it's a shortcut, and then just go ahead, enable this connected only. Then when you select one of these vertices and you press G to just move it, you can see it will move an area with it, which you can also make it bigger or smaller by pressing page down or page up on your keyboard, or just scrolling with your mouse. And yes, it just makes your work way easier and faster. And that's quite it. I'm cool with this one and I like it so much. We can go ahead and do the rest, which is just going ice out, adding diamonds, etc. So I just go ahead and I disable the reference because we kinda don't need it anymore. And I just go to edit this one. But before I go editing, I just make a duplicate of this by pressing Shift D and just right clicking, and I just press M to move it in my saved collection, which we made this one in the last part, and it's just a backup selection and you can save your objects before changing them. So I'm going to add a little bit depth. So I'm going to add depth to it. I just do it by adding the solidify modifier and make sure the scale is applied, and I just enter 0 for this offset, and I just move this up and increase the number. Something like this is good. Maybe a little bit thinner. This is on you, whatever you like. And I just go to the edit mode again to edit something a bit. I just want to make this part like straight, something like this, maybe something like this, yes. And I go back to the show overlays mode and I move this up. That is it. Maybe a little bit more. Yes, I like this. This is good. I just go ahead. Now let me just right click and choose shade auto smooth. That's fine. I just apply the solidify modifier by pressing Ctrl A, or maybe you can go to this menu and choose apply. I go back to the top view. I press tab to go to the edit mode. I press 3 to go to the face mode, and then I just select all of these front faces. That you can see the bottom faces or the side faces are not selected. I just go ahead, I press I to insert the faces just like this, and I just release it here by left clicking. Something like this is good, but it's not done yet. I press E to extrude it down, and I'm cool with something like this. It's on you though, you can make it like deeper or more shallow, I don't know, but it's on you. Then after that, I just hold Alt and I select this one to select the stroke of this 4, and I also hold Alt and Shift to just select this stroke as well. I do the same, I hold Alt and Shift, select this one, Alt Shift select, and Alt Shift select. That is fine. I just do that inserting thing again. I press I to insert the faces. Something like this is fine. And I extrude it down by pressing E. And that is it. I think it's pretty good. And the next step is adding more loop cuts to create the path of those diamonds. I just go ahead, hit Ctrl R, add a loop cut here, then I add a loop cut here and here. And I do the same for the other letters. Just like this. And after adding these loop cuts, I just go ahead to select the path of my diamonds, where I want my diamonds to be. So I just select this one. I go ahead, hold Ctrl, select this, and select this, and this, and this. And finally this one, also these two as well. You just need to select the center edge that you added by adding loop cuts. And to select more edge loops, just hold Shift, select one of these, and after that hold Ctrl to select the rest of those. You can also change the position of the vertices that are in these edges later when you added your diamonds, but for now I just go ahead and select the whole thing, and after selecting every part of these edges, I just go ahead, press Shift D, duplicate them, and after that immediately I right click to leave them at their default location, and after that I press P to make a separate selection from these edges. And just like that, it appears in our outline. Just rename it to something like diamond path dot inner maybe. And don't forget to save your project by pressing Ctrl S. And let's move on. I select the object, I go back to the edit mode by pressing tab, and I go ahead, I add my loop cut right here by pressing Ctrl R and just clicking here. Then I add another loop cut here, just Ctrl R and left click, then right click. Then just go ahead, add a loop cut here, add one here, and these loop cuts are where that I'm going to add some diamonds in it, you know. After adding all the loop cuts, just select them. This one is selected. To select another one, hold Alt and Shift and select here. It will select the whole loop for you. And then go select this one. Then select this and select this. After selecting all of these, press Shift D and right click to leave them at their default position, and then press P and create a separate selection. Go back to object mode, select this new object, which is your path, and rename it to something like diamond path point stroke. And that is it. The rest of this is just editing our diamonds a bit and to go to geometry nodes to do the final things. So I just enable this diamonds collection, then I just duplicate this diamond and right click and I rename it to diamond path point stroke point object or OBJ. And I also do the same for this diamond. I press Shift D and then I rename it to diamond path inner OBJ. And now the work will be easy. You just move them out of that collection and I disable this. We basically don't need this diamonds collection. I just made it to make the work easier and faster. Also, we don't need these two objects. I will going to disable them in the future, but for now let's just hide them and then we disable them in the future. After I'll go to the geometry node workspace and I go ahead with the stroke path right here. I just select it. I try to select it. Yeah, just like that. I add a new geometry node setting and I rename this one diamond instancing stroke. And I go ahead, I add an instance on points node between these input and output. And for the instance, I just click and drag on the diamond path stroke object to move it here, and I connect it to instance. Then we can see something. We are going to scale them down by clicking and drag on the scale amounts, just like that, to see what is fine. Let's go ahead and maybe we can go to the wireframe mode. Just clicking here or pressing Z and select this one. And now if we zoom in, we can adjust the scale, the approximate scale, maybe 0.38 or something like smaller. But we can also see them from the side by pressing 3 on numpad. We can go to the right side and see them, and we can also go with a number like 0.03. And yeah, I like it. I go back to the top view by pressing 7 on my numpad, just like that. Go back to the viewport. So now the size of the diamonds is fine. What we need to do is adding another node that is called resample curve between this group input and the instance on points node, and change it to length. But before we make this resample curve node working, we need to add another node that is called mesh to curve and put it right here. Now it's curve and we can resample it. It's this easy, and I just enter a number like 0.05 or less, 0.01 and 0.030. Yeah, something like this sounds good. We can also rotate them by just playing with this value. I go for 22.5 and also make this a little more bigger, 0.040. Yeah, to just make this gap between each of these diamonds. I like it. Go to the material preview and you can see the material is working because the diamond has its material. We haven't applied the material to this object yet, so I just select it. I go to edit mode and I first select all. U and Smart UV project. Then I just go to the material properties, I select the glitter, and you can see it's working good. You can also change it in the material setting later. So for now, let's just go back to the viewport mode and let's add the other diamonds to the inner part of this pendant. So I just select that path and I add a new modifier that is called geometry node instead of adding the setup here, because I just want to select the last one, select the last geometry node setup we just made. And now we have these diamonds, but here I'm going to duplicate this by hitting on this little option. Now if I change this one, those that are added to stroke won't change, and this is pretty good. But if we don't duplicate it, you can see whatever we do to this, it will apply to those we added earlier. So just duplicate it and you can do a couple things. You can either just scale them up and have them here, just adjust the gap between and adjust the spaces just like this, or maybe way more smaller, like in the x-axis, also in the y and z-axis, but more in the z-axis, just like that. And then just go ahead, adjust the size, adjust the space in between. You can make them smaller or bigger, closer or like further. Yeah, this is on you. And after doing this, just go to the edit mode by pressing tab and go to the X-ray mode, press 1, and then just change the location of these vertices to adjust the location of the diamonds. Like if you have some extra space here, just select this, press G and X, then move this up and you are good. This is easy. You can do the same for all of these. When you move them, the diamonds will set properly. You can also apply the instances and change this place later, so don't worry about that. And then you have something like this, which is good, but this is not the place where I want to end this tutorial. So this is the first look, and if you are happy with it, you can just keep going, but I prefer to change this diamond to something we made earlier that is called diamond path inner object, which is these diamonds. So we're going to play with these diamonds a little to just make it more like what it is in real life and the real pendant, the real chain, you know. Firstly, I go ahead and I reset this rotation to 0, and then I reset the scales too. I just make them 0.2, all of them, and then I just add a node by pressing Shift A that is called random value, and I add it here. I change the type of this from float to vector, and I just connect it to scale of this node. Firstly, I just select all of these values and I enter 0.2 to go smaller, and also I select all of these, I go 0.2, I'm sorry, 0.2 to just make everything similar to each other. After that, I just decrease the distance between them by changing this length value of the resample curve, and then I just go ahead and play with these random values nodes amounts. Like for the x-axis, I just go for a number between like maybe 0.05 to something like 0.0160. And again, I want to make these more closer, and I can also do it more exact by adding another node that is called math. Put it right here, change it to multiply, and enter a low number for the second value like 0.01, connect it to length, and then when you play with this value you have more control. If you don't, just make this number smaller like 0.005 or 0.001, and you have more control over this. So this is fine. I'm going to play with the Z value and let's see what's up. I just play with these numbers. You can do it too to find your best look for this chain, for your pendant. And these are all like personal. So yeah, it's just about playing with numbers. You can have different numbers, different looks, but I'm fine with this. Also, don't worry about this part, I'm going to fix it in a second. Basically, we are going to select this, go to edit mode, and maybe disable the geometry node in the viewport for a second to separate the paths, and after that I'm going to enable it. So just select this one and press V on your keyboard to just make this separated, and then I just right click, or we can also press V and then press Y to move it in the Y axis, then again press V and press X, press V and X, and now when all of these are separated, connect them together. Like I select both of these, I press M and I choose at center. I do the same for these. Just make sure that you don't do clipping. Like if you move this to here, they will clip together and they will merge. So yeah, don't do that mistake. And for more certainty, I just turn this off. Now I can select this edge. I press Ctrl X to dissolve it. I'm also going to do the same for all of these as well, because they're kind of extra and we don't need them. So the separation process still needs to be done. I just select this vertex, I press V to separate it, and I also delete the other vertex by selecting it, pressing X and vertices. I also separate this one just like that, select this one and delete it. Now we have 3 different paths for the 4 number. One of the paths is this, you can see it, is horizontal. One of them is vertical, which is this, which is for more detailed work, but I prefer to keep it clean and do that. So for the P letter, I'm going to select this vertex, press V to separate it, and I just leave it here, or maybe I press X and delete it. I can extrude it if I want later on. And I also separate this vertex and just delete it. And yeah, that's done. 2 paths for the P, and for the F letter, I select this, press V, I just right click, select the other vertex, I press X, delete, then select this one, V to separate it and X to delete. And I also dissolve all of these vertices by selecting them and pressing Ctrl X. And I also delete this to just move this vertex up and make it straight. So that is it. Now I'm going to divide them into separate objects on the basis of their direction. So I just hold Alt, select the vertical paths, and hold Shift to select all of them. I press P, I make a separate selection. I just rename it to make sure I don't confuse these with each other. I just rename it to vertical, or just V maybe, and I change this to inner.h for horizontal. And there is also one more path, or maybe 2. I just select this object, go to edit mode and go to edge mode. I hold Alt, select this one, I make another collection for it by pressing P and choosing selection, and just name it P. The last thing I want to do is selecting this path, pressing P, and make a separate selection for it, name it like 4. Now just go back to object mode by pressing tab, and to organize my work I prefer to select all of these objects and select another collection for them by pressing M, new collection, diamond paths. That's it. And I just move this diamond path stroke to this one as well, just to make everything clear. And I go for the first one, which is this path. I just enable the geometry node for that, and now I can duplicate it. I must duplicate it basically to just have a new setting to work on and just don't affect others. And now I go ahead, I change this Z value to something like 45. This is good, this is straight, I like it. For the next one, I just go ahead and select the vertical path and I make it duplicate to not affect the others. and I just enable the geometry node. Then I just enter 90 for the z-axis of the rotation. Then we can just go to the edit mode and vertex mode, just X-ray, just move it a little bit. Somewhere like here is fine. We can add those later. And for this part, I just select this and go to the edit mode. I just move this vertex a little. Somewhere like here is fine. If you want to be very clean, you need to delete and rotate them later. And for this part, which is our horizontal path, I just turn on the geometry node and it's pretty fine. I just make sure that everything is good. And for this, I just go ahead, select this vertex, and I press double G to slide. After I press double G, I press C to slide in the other direction. Something like this is good. Also, if you are not happy with this clipping, you can just go to edit mode and add a vertex here by pressing Ctrl R. Then just slide it to here, add another vertex. Pressing Ctrl R is adding vertex, then add a new vertex between them and delete it. Now you can see you have two different paths, but it just does not have that intersection. So yeah, that's it. Now let's go and do the same for this path as well. Make it a little longer, somewhere like here. Do the same for this one. Just move them and play with them, and after that go for the other path, the horizontal path, and just fix things. Now I'm just adjusting all of these paths to their correct location to just make this clean. And in the end, just select the last path, which is the P, and turn on the geometry node modifier, display, and then just go ahead and duplicate the geometry node setting. I think you know the game now. And then just rotate it to a number like 30 maybe. Yeah, something like this is fine. Then you can go and play with it as well, like separate it to 3 parts, like this one and this. Just press V to separate them, and then make another object and another selection. Then just go ahead, duplicate the geometry node setting and rotate it. I don't know, you can maybe divide it into more parts like 3, 4, but now I'm happy with it, and I'll just leave it to you if you want to change it more and make it like cleaner. And that's it. I think we are almost done with this part, but the final layer I want to add diamonds to it is in the bottom of these faces. Like, let me first disable this collection, diamond collection, and select my object, go to edit mode, go to viewport as well, and just press T to go to the face mode. And I want to select these faces in the bottom of these pendants. I can just press Ctrl and space to make my workspace full. So you just select these faces like this, hold Ctrl and select them together, hold Shift and select them with a box, and that's it. I just press Shift to duplicate them, then right click, then press P and make a separate selection. This is our final layer of diamonds. I just press Ctrl space again to back to our workspace, and I just rename this object to something like surface diamond, or I don't know what to call it, but I just move it to the diamond path collection by pressing M, and I enable that collection again. I go ahead, select that object, and I add a new geometry node setting to it. And for this one, I press Shift A, I'll go for a distribute points on faces. I put it right here, and I also press slash on my numpad to hide everything except this object. And now I can increase the density to make more points, but I'm going to change this from random to Poisson disk, if I pronounce it right. And I just make more of these points by just increasing the density max. After that, I just go ahead and I add an instance on points node. I put it right after the distribute points on face node, and then I just go ahead with this diamond that is called diamond path stroke obj, which we used it as a strokes diamond, which was pretty good. I just scale it down just like that. This is fine. And now I'm just going to add a math node to make my work easier. I connect it to the density max, and I go ahead, change it from add to multiply, and I just increase the number of both. And now if I just increase this one to something like 200 and then increase the first value, you can see I have more control over these points basically. And then I just increase the distance mean to increase the distance between each of these points, and then I just add more of them, maybe make them a little smaller, like 0.03 is fine I think. And I decrease the distance 0.01. This is not bad. Yeah, something like this sounds good. All these little diamonds. And yes, now I'm done, and the next step is parenting this object with that base we made in the last part of this tutorial, and then we can render them all together. Now I just go ahead and rename this to letters or something like that, and I make another collection. I select it, I press M, and I click on this new collection. I name it letters. Then I just unhide these two diamonds and I just move them to the disabled collection, so we won't see them in our renders. And that's it. I save my project, and after all I enable my main collection and I move the letters to it. I also move the diamonds path to this main collection, and I just move this base down, and it's basically the holder of our everything. And now while this holder is selected, I press A on my keyboard to select everything else, then I press Ctrl P and I choose object keep transform. Now if I select this holder and rotate it or maybe move it, you can see everything else will move and rotate with it, and that is exactly what we want. And I just right click and choose shade auto smooth to just smooth it out and have a better shape. Now I can also enable the geometry node setup. You can see the other diamonds on this base, which is pretty dope, but for now I just disable it, and when we wanted to render it and do our lighting setup, I'm going to enable it again. Now I just press 3 on my numpad and press G and Z to move this up a little bit. Something like here is fine. So to render this one, we need a background, which I want to do it with the plane. As always, as we created everything in this tutorial with a plane, with just a single plane. Just move it up to see how much we got space. Maybe scale it a bit. Yeah, something like this is fine. Now I go to add a camera, I press Shift A, I go for camera, then it's here. I move it up by pressing G and Z, and I also select my camera, hold Shift, select this ground. I move them onto another collection that is called Studio, and I do all of these classifying etc. to just keep my work organized, so you don't have to do the same, but if you ask me, I'll say that do them. So now I just hold Alt and press R to reset the rotation of my camera. Then I move it up, and I also right click here to just add a vertical split right here. In this space I want to have my camera view, so I press 0 on my numpad to go to the camera view, and I press T, then I disable this and this. Now while my camera is selected, I go to the camera properties and I go to viewport display. I just make this pass apart out up to 1 to just fade out everything into black, and I just move my camera up by pressing G and Z, and I add focal length like this, maybe 85 is a good number. I'm sorry, 85. Now I want to add an empty object. I press Shift A, I go ahead to this empty and I add a plane axis. This is what I want to track my camera with it. So I move it to the studio collection. Then I select my camera and I go to this section that is called Object Constraints Properties, and I add a track to modifier. Then I just select this empty object from here. And now if I move my camera like this by pressing G, you can see that it's tracked to this object, and that object is this empty. You can change its position by pressing G and move it to just change your camera direction, and that's it. That's everything I did here. And I just increase the focal length a bit, something like this is good. And the rest is basically lighting, maybe placing my camera right here. Yeah, I like it. The rest is lighting and also giving this ground a material. So first, I just right click here, I go for horizontal split, I split this up, and I go for a shader editor as this area, and I add a new material for this ground. I name it like ground or background, whatever. And then I just go to the shading viewport here. I just press Z on my keyboard, and when you press Z you can change between solid, rendered, or wireframe, or even material preview mode, and that's the shortcut. And here I just add a noise texture maybe, and a Musgrave texture, and just select one of these. I press Ctrl T and make sure that you enable the Node Wrangler add-on, because you need that add-on to just press Ctrl T and then these things appear. After this, I just press Ctrl Shift and I right click and drag to just mix them up. And I hold Ctrl Shift and left click to preview this material. Also change this one to material preview. And also this is the magic of Node Wrangler add-on. You can use shortcuts and like make your work way faster. I hold Ctrl Shift to preview this Musgrave texture. This is just a little playing. You can skip it if you want, but I want to render it in a good, form. So I just do these little things. I preview the mix node, maybe use it as a factor, and this is as a color too, and maybe give it a little bit of noise, details, and roughness, like decrease the roughness or give it some roughness, and just increase a little bit of, and increase the roughness a little bit, like something like this, a little bit of distortion. And yeah, I like it very much. I just move them here and I go ahead with the color ramp node. I put it right here, and all of these are for the roughness inputs. We did nothing yet until we make this darker and increase the metallic, something like this, and that is fine. I just make this black color to something like 0.1 or 0.2 of value, and this white to 0.6 maybe, and maybe we make it more rough like 0.1, make it a little bit like this. Yeah, now I like the background. Maybe I can also make it darker, something like this. Now I like it, and let's do the lighting setup. I just go ahead and switch from EV to cycles, and I change this device to GPU. I also make this max sample to something like 128, maybe 128 is a good number to render this out. And I just switch to render mode. And now we have the light that is because of the word light, which I'm going to disable it and turn it off by going to this properties and just make this strength to 0. Or if you want to like add an HDRI image, you can use it which is pretty good, but I'm not gonna do that in this tutorial. I'm just going to add an area light, move it up. Also move this to the studio collection by pressing M. Then I just go to the object properties and I change this to disk from a square, and I just make it a little bit bigger and go to top view by pressing 7. I make it bigger. I move it somewhere like here, make it bigger, and give it some power like 250. Yeah, that's fine. That is good. I like it. Let me move it somewhere like here. Yeah. Now I really like it. Let's enter 300 for the power, and also change a little bit of this ground material. I just make this color to 0.50. It just makes it the reflections a bit smoother. And now I just duplicate this light and I press Shift Z to move it in area axis instead of Z, and I make this rectangle maybe, and also change this to solid mode, and I rotate it. I press R and Z and I just rotate it. Then I press R again and I press X twice just to rotate it in the x-axis of the local direction, and maybe make this, maybe decrease this Y size and increase this X one, and I just move it down by G and Z. And if I just turn this headlight off, I can see what I'm doing, which is not pretty, but it's not bad. We can fix it. I just want some highlights, you know. I go with a number like 80 or something. I make it like closer. I move it up. Press R, X twice, and this is it. I think that's fine. I just duplicate it, pressing Shift D, and I rotate it towards our object. And now if I enable this headlight, you can see it's pretty good, and I think we are good to go. And we are almost done, but I prefer to just increase the power of this light to a number like 130, and you can also change its color if you want. I don't know, anything you like, and just play with it, render it and see how it looks, then render it again. Now I'm happy with this simple setup, so I just go ahead, I go to render menu and I choose render image. After a while that it got done, I'll show you how I added those glare to my image by compositing in Blender, which is very easy, and we'll do it in a minute. So now the render is done, and I can save it by going to the image menu and choose save or save as, and just name it and save it here. But if I want to add those glares, I just close this window and I go to the compositing workspace, and here I checkbox use nodes, and after that I go and change this to image editor, and then I just make this bigger and I choose the render result as the image. So I have this here, and I can also preview this render layer by just holding Ctrl Shift and left click on this node, and here we go. I can also hold Shift and right click and drag to just make this one single nodal, and that's it. Then I just press Shift A and I add a glare node and I put it right here. Then after that I change this from streaks to fog glow, and now I can make it bigger. And if I just increase this mix value up to 1, you can see our fog is not obvious, and what we can do is adding more light when we want to render, or we can just go and add a bright contrast node and maybe an exposure. Yeah, when we enter 1 for exposure, it will get definitely better. Now yeah, like this, and I just enter 0 for the mix value and enter 0.3 for the exposure, maybe 0.4. And after that I just duplicate this glare node and I change it to streaks. Now I just make it to 1 to to see how it looks. And I think we don't need this bright contrast, but I just keep it just in case we want to use it. These glares are pretty dope and I really like them. The first thing I do is enter 0 for this mix value and enter 0.8 for the threshold. That will help us to have more glare, and yeah, something like this is fine. Yeah, I like this one. And to save it, you can either press Alt S and save it here, or you can just go ahead to this image menu and save it from here. And yeah guys, that's it. We are pretty much done, and ask your questions in the comments. I wish you good luck on your projects and I wish you the best. Stay tuned for the next. Goodbye.